Welcome to Todd Talks, a small segment of our Plywood Palace Garage YouTube channel. I'm your host, Todd Touchberry, and today we're stepping back to a time when roads were dirt, speed was measured in courage, and the automobile was still a mechanical marvel. At the heart of it all, the car that put the world on wheels, the Ford Model T. But we won't stop there. We'll also look at other pre-war classics and talk to the people who keep them alive.
So grab your driving goggles, advance the spark, and let's take a ride into the golden age of motoring.
All right, I think we're live. Does that look live, Steve?
Looks good. Hello, everyone.
Good. All right, so I need
I seem to have lost audio.
Uh-oh. I'm a talking. Anybody hearing?
I hear you. Let's see here. Technical difficulties on round one.
Be surprised if we didn't have a few.
All right, Heath must have backed out.
There we go.
There we go.
Are you back?
I'm back.
Hey, there we go. Good.
All right, so Heath, I appreciate you joining, and this is one of our only the second live I've ever done, and thanks to Steven from Fliver Channel for joining us and co-hosting, and he's been kind enough to guide me on these lives, and he has a great YouTube channel that I definitely suggest everyone checking out. Fliver Channel.
Nice to meet you, Heath.
Nice to meet you too, Steve. Thanks for having me, Todd.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on. So a while back, I started following Heath on some of his social media stuff and didn't know him yet. And Jennifer and I visit Western North Carolina a good bit. And walking into the Estes-Winn Museum, and I was like, I know you. I follow you on follow you on social media. So anyway, after that, Heath and I have stayed in great touch with each other. And he is quite the interesting guy, and he has done a whole lot of research. But first thing I want to talk about is the Mountaineer Motor Tours.
Yes, sir.
And if I can, let's see if I got this right. Nope, that's the wrong one. So I'll let you talk while we go through these pictures and start telling us about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, so Todd and I met on some of my social media surrounding Mountaineer Motor Tours. And this is I call it a storytelling company in Asheville. So I give historical tours of Asheville, North Carolina. In my 1923 Ford Model T is how the business started. And then I've added on some other offerings to that, which is I do step-on bus guide works. If you have a large charter group, I can give a historical tour to that group. And then I also give historical speaking presentations. So I can come to your business meeting or special event with a multimedia presentation, and I speak on a number of topics about Asheville's history. So I just did a presentation this morning on what we call the evolution of Asheville's built environment, which is a very academic title, but it covers architectural history and the evolution of our natural landscape through land developers, natural disaster, financial situations like the Great Depression that changed a lot of our architecture. So those are some of the things that I do. And then I also love to write and research about Asheville history, especially automotive history, which is something I've always been curious about. Being a car guy and Asheville native and growing up here, you kind of want to know what came before you.
So how did the idea come about doing a tour company, and which came first, the Model T or the tour company?
That's a great question. So I had the idea for the tour. I started when I graduated Appalachian State. I graduated with a degree in music business, and I'm a percussionist. So this was part of their music industry studies program. And part of that program, my concentration was in music merchandising. So I wanted to build drums and sell them, custom drums. And so my concentration on was selling musical instruments and merchandising and marketing around those. But at the time that I graduated, the stock market tanked in the crash of 2008, and people were not buying that many musical instruments. So that market started to go away. And as part of this program, I had to fulfill an internship. So I applied to an internship with the Percussive Arts Society, which is a nonprofit member organization that specializes in education for collegiate level percussionists. And as part of that internship, I not only worked for this nonprofit, but I was hired as an intern to run their percussion museum, which was called the Rhythm Discovery Center. And I started giving historical tours of what were significant percussion instruments. So we had drum sets belonging to like Buddy Rich, Gene Krupa, Ringo Starr, John Bonham. And we also had exhibits on how sound waves work. So we would teach kids about the fundamental sounds of percussion, where a lot of these instruments originated, and then go into the 20th century of like what we think of as the modern drum. So that's kind of how I started as a tour guide. And I always loved history. I grew up with parents that loved architecture and things like that. And this is me out on a tour. So when I moved back to Asheville from Indianapolis, I really missed being a tour guide. I actually kind of took a pretty big career pivot, and I began a career in public accounting. So I had an undergraduate degree in business, and I went back and got a master's degree in accounting from Western Carolina while I was working full time. I was taking night classes, and I never kind of felt like I fit into the accounting world that well. I did enjoy the work that I did, but it was I kind of felt like a round peg in a square hole. And I kept dreaming about doing a tour in Asheville, and I wanted to do something that was very unique to our history. And my wife and I, we took a trip to Havana, Cuba in 2018, which had been a dream of mine for a long time. I studied a lot of Spanish and Cuban culture in school, and of course, loved the big American cars down there.
Yeah.
And we took a 2-day visit down there. So we went down on a Royal Caribbean cruise. And the first day we took a bus tour with maybe 35, 40 people. And the next day we were allowed to do what we wanted. At that time, under the presidential administration, there was an educational visa that you could go down there. So we could kind of do any tour we wanted. And we hired a 1957 Mercury convertible to take us on a tour of Havana. So it was just us and a local native of Havana. And we went out to Ernest Hemingway's house, the Finca Villa, and we rode all over the island. And he gave us such this great, personal tour. And I thought, well, how could that translate to Asheville? And I started thinking about, when you think of Havana, Cuba, you think of the big American cars that were there. And so I thought, what kind of car is emblematic of Asheville, North Carolina? And I was talking to my wife about it. She said, you got to find an old car, something from the 30s or 40s. And I was like, yeah. And we were trying to come up with a good name for it. And Appalachian State, where I went to school, the mascot is Yosef the Mountaineer. And I was also at the time researching a mountain craft company called Three Mountaineers. And one of the other things in this era, so in the early teens and 20s, the terminology for touring folks was, they would say, we're going to go on a motor tour. And so that was the terminology. Like if you look in the newspaper, they're like, a motor tour will be provided at the Great Smoky Mountains. So I thought Mountaineer Motor Tours. And this was during COVID that I kind of came up with the idea, during lockdown. We all had some time to think about stuff. And as it would happen, a year later, 2021, a friend of my wife's that she plays tennis with, her husband is the manager of the Estes-Winn Car Museum here in Asheville, my good friend Tom Anders. And he was looking for some part-time help to kind of sub in for guys that wanted to take a day off. And this is a great little museum we'll get into a little bit more later with Todd. But so I started working at the museum, and I was telling Tom about this idea. I said, man, I really want to build out a nice private tour that's high quality and very in-depth tour of Asheville. And he said, well, I've got this friend, Steve Lyda, who has a Model T, and it's been modified a little bit, and he's looking to sell it. Steve had maybe 6 or 7 different cars and was trying to downsize and was going to move to another house. And I said, man, I'd love to find out about this Model T. And so he connected me with Steve, and we ended up working on a deal for me to buy this Model T. I'm sure Todd will get into some of the modifications on the Model T. And I reached out to a friend of mine who is a graphic designer, and he came up with a logo, and we started thinking about, I wanted to build a tour that would really show the native perspective, like that would get into the evolution of architecture and culture and all these things in Asheville. And just started driving around town and put together a route. thought, hey, I want the tour to be generally about an hour, 15 minutes. Hours is kind of, after about an hour, people start to glaze over a little bit, even if even if they're riding in the Model T. And from there, it took probably another 6 or 8 months to kind of work out commercial insurance and marketing, and then just like, all right, it's time to go for it and do the first tour. So I just put out a call on social media to my friends and said, hey, I'm starting this business. Anybody that wants to take a tour, I'll take you for free. And I had some good friends from Appalachian State that took me up on it, and they were my first tour. And it was really a lot of fun. So we started in the fall of 2022, and my wife was incredibly supportive. I had a great teacher and lifelong mentor, Jennifer Robinson, that was my drum teacher in high school, and we stayed in touch all these years. And they really were like, hey, you can do it. Just go for it. So I started taking the car out, getting used to driving it, and had to do some work on it as well. But that's kind of how it all evolved. So it's just, and then a couple years ago, I was able to quit my job in accounting. I was doing the tours part-time and on the weekends during the summer and fall, kind of trying to make that work with two different tax seasons. There's, one in the spring and one in the fall for all the work that doesn't get done in the spring. And was finally able to quit in December of 2023 and pursue history full-time.
Oh, that's good. So what are a couple of the highlight stops you always try to make on your tour? Like what are some of the keystone?
Absolutely. So
Nashville.
For everybody, the tour, I meet everybody at the Estes-Winn Car Museum, which is it's called Historic Grovewood Village, and it is a collection of these beautiful 6 English-style cottage buildings that was originally home to a weaving factory called Biltmore Industries that was weaving wool fabric for men and women's clothing. And all these buildings were housing different pieces of the manufacturing process. And in the 1950s, that business went bankrupt and was bought by a local automobile dealer named Harry Blomberg, who had our Cadillac and Pontiac dealer and loved history. And he transformed it into more of what it is today. So he installed a car museum in one of the buildings, a museum of craft history, and a craft gallery. And then they later added a restaurant and artist studios in the 90s. So we begin the tour there. And from there, that departs through what we call the historic Grove Park neighborhood. And this was a neighborhood that started being developed by a pharmaceutical magnate named Edwin Wiley Grove, who had developed a product called Grove's Tasteless Chill Tonic that contained quinine, and it was found effective in treating the symptoms of malaria. And he parlayed the fortune from that into commercial real estate development. And he came up to Asheville, ironically, to get away from all this pollution in St. Louis, where he was manufacturing the Tasteless Chill Tonic. And he came to Asheville because he would have this chronic bronchitis that would lead to unrelenting bouts of hiccups. And at the time, all these doctors would prescribe people to come to Asheville, North Carolina, breathe the clean mountain air. And he started looking around and bought up hundreds of acres and started developing a luxury neighborhood, and then built the famous Grove Park Inn. So we depart from the car museum and we go past the Grove Park Inn and we go into downtown Asheville, where we see we have a lot of beautiful Art Deco architecture that was done in the 20s, was like incredibly prolific, really from one architect. It was a guy named Douglas Ellington, who's a native of Clayton, North Carolina. And he came up during the land boom of the 20s and designed our City Hall, which is a very prominent building, First Baptist Church, a beautiful building called the S&W Cafeteria. And then I have a couple of additions to the tour. So we go through another historic neighborhood called Montford that has a lot of old Queen Anne and Victorian houses that are now bed and breakfasts, who are a lot of the businesses that I work with are these local bed and breakfasts. And then I also have another tour that's really just architecture and nature focused that goes through a neighborhood north of downtown Asheville that is called Lakeview Park, that centers around a man-made lake called Beaver Lake that was built as kind of a pleasure ground in the early 20s. So I cover a lot of ground around town, but we see a lot of really beautiful old homes. I'll just add a little bit more. Asheville's history is fairly unique in that we took out a tremendous amount of municipal debt to fund all this infrastructure upgrades as well as new architecture in the city. And that ended up racking up a tab of about $3 billion in today's money.
Wow.
And rather than declaring bankruptcy or defaulting on that loan, we restructured it and paid it off over about 45 years. So that didn't really leave any money for urban renewal.
Yeah.
And that preserved all these old buildings. So we have a lot of great treasures there.
All right, Heath, Vince
Yep.
from Baggett Corner, just to touch more, a little bit more on the insurance or whatever. How did that work out? Just to touch on that for a second.
Sure. So that is one of the things that is kind of difficult when you're doing these tours. Obviously, safety is first to mind. So when I went to insure this, I was like, hey, I want to make sure I had the most comprehensive policy possible. So I work with a local insurance agency company, and to insure the Model T, I had to do a couple things. So when I registered it, being the age that it is, it had to be inspected by the North Carolina Department of License and Theft that will review old vehicles from out of state. So I purchased that Model T in Tennessee, and then I obtained a commercial insurance policy that is very robust and expensive that covers the Model T, and then I also have a general liability policy that covers the business as well. So you have to be pretty detailed in your description of the car.
All
All right, talking about the car, you have a rather interesting Model T.
Yep.
And I'll pause it when we get around to the side, because this
So
really
far,
threw
it looks
Steven
pretty
off.
normal. I don't
Yeah,
think.
this
It looks
really-
pretty normal.
This threw Steven off pretty good when I showed him.
Yeah, I think when I looked at this right about now, I said, "Wait, what?"
So the Model T, so this is the car I bought from Steve, my friend at the museum. And when Steve bought it, I don't have a ton of history on the car. Unfortunately, Steve bought it from an older couple out of Florida, and he intended to use for like wedding getaway car service and like photography. And he was driving home late one day in the rain, and the brakes, as you know, are not always super good in the rain. And he ended up in a lady's front yard and said, "I've had it. I'm going to resto mod this Model T."
What
So
they
he-
part of a NASCAR team? What they're-
Steve was not. So Steve, when he started out, he was trying to obtain all the parts for the car, and it's kind of an interesting collection of parts. So he started by
Pretty
assembling
much
all this.
every Model T is like that. Yeah.
He started by he got the engine is a 2.3 liter Ford overhead valve Lima engine, and it was being used in an industrial generator in Michigan. And some rats had chewed through the wiring, and these guys were selling the engine because it was cheaper to buy a new generator than to rewire it. And it only had maybe 30 hours of runtime on it, and was running off natural gas originally. And then he got a C4 automatic transmission and a Ranger 8.8 rear axle out of a 2004 Ranger that has a 373 gear. And Steve connected with a NASCAR legend here in Asheville, is a guy named Larry Ingram, who is the crew chief and brother for Jack Ingram, Jack Ironman Ingram, NASCAR Hall of Famer. And Jack fabricated the motor mounts and the subframe to hold this new engine and transmission. And then the rear axle is mounted with a set of NASCAR Cup car trailing arms that connect this fabricated subframe to the rear axle. So I have a nice big steel drive shaft connected it rather than a torque tube on the original. And then it was mostly done when I got it. It has the stock Ranger drum brakes on the back. There are no brakes on the front like a stock T. And then it has a single master cylinder Willwood master cylinder. So
Well, it must
but
take you
it's
quite a bit of work to keep it running, because you put a lot of miles on it, and like wheel bearings, steering, all that's still standard T.
the wheel bearings are new roller bearings, but it is still the stock T front axle steering. It does have a steering stabilizer on the front to kind of help out with that, with any but it's been super reliable. I really don't have to do a lot of maintenance on it other than greasing the front suspension and wheel bearings, and like just regular change of fluids. So it's very reliable.
Robert's asking about the radiator.
So the radiator is a Speedway. Speedway motors like for one of their T-bucket roadster kits. So it's a 4-core radiator, and I don't have a cowl on it. I don't have any issues with it running hot. It usually there's so much airflow through there. It usually runs at about 190, even in hot. If I'm sitting in standing traffic. And when I got it, Steve had a fairly big. It was like kind of one of those Amazon carburetors, like a replica of the Motorcraft 2150 4-barrel, and it was
Yep.
way too much fuel. So we switched it to a Weber 3236 carburetor and then jetted it down because it really doesn't want a lot of fuel. And then I have a little electric fuel pump, and then using the stock T gas tank under the seat.
Okay.
So it's pretty efficient and runs really well, but we try to do it to where, I still have the wood spoke wheels. Now the rear wheels have been re-drilled and sleeved to go on the Ranger rear axle. So it has modern lug nuts on the back there, but we wanted to look as stock as possible. So I have had some people, it's not very loud. It has a little glass pack muffler on it. But I actually had a guy run up in traffic, and he's like, "Hey, is that a 2.3 Pinto motor?" And I was like,
What the heck?
pretty close. I don't know how he knew the sound. And then it's got a little 65 Mustang shifter. And I kind of want to update the pedals, and the gauges are like aftermarket Bosch gauges. And
Yeah, you want to weld on some T foot pads or something.
yeah, that's the only thing that kind of gives it away. Everything else, we try to keep it really as stealth as possible. But I drive it a lot, so it does help with the reliability in the hills. I don't trailer it. I drive it from my house in Candler to Asheville, so it takes me 25-30 minutes to get into town, just taking some of the back roads.
Yeah,
And
so you
then
put
when
a lot of miles on it every year.
I put a lot of miles on it, yeah, and then when I'm on the tour, I'm usually out for an hour. I have enough energy, and the fuel will sustain that I can do 2 tours usually in a day. So at any time, I'm usually out in it for 2 to 3 hours at a time.
Wow.
So is the gas pedal further over?
It's further over, yeah, because you have to kind of drive with 2 feet. So I do the brake with my left foot and then kind of straddle the shifter, and then but it's down pretty low, and then do the gas.
That probably
gas
helps
on the
you to
right.
turn around and talk to your guests kind of while you're driving.
So I don't do that. I use a headset and a Bluetooth speaker so that they can hear really well. The car's not loud, but it is kind of hard to hear when you're facing the opposite direction of your guests.
So Vince is asking if you've had anyone catch on to the conversions or whatever, and you said you had someone ask if it was a 2.3, but anyone else or whatever that has a T by chance or has a story about
I have had some other people with the T have caught on, but most of the people that ride with me don't know it's been modified. They might ask about the engine or like what kind of gas mileage it gets or something like that. But typically, the average person is really not aware.
Well, you should just schedule a fuel stop in the middle of every tour, and when you get out and lift the seat out and fill the gas in there, they'll know that they're in an authentic car.
That's right.
So are you still using like a Model T gas tank, or?
I am, yeah. The stock gas tank underneath the seat.
Any cool breakdown stories while you were on tour?
Thankfully not. I have had a lot of fun tour experiences. Like I've had a lot of strange, probably one of the weirder things was in downtown Asheville, I was behind somebody had put a vinyl wrap on a Tesla Cybertruck, and I was right it was the Cybertruck and then me in traffic, and this group of school kids goes by that's taking a walking tour, and they're like, "We like your car better." And I was like, "Yes." So a lot of funny stuff like that. I've had some people say some kind of goofy stuff. Like I had a girl say, "What did your horse and buggy break down?" or something.
This is an upgrade, right?
That's an upgrade. But most people, I think the thing I love about the T is that it makes so many people smile. Like when I'm driving around, and that's the best part of
you drive T's to make other people happy more so than yourself even.
I have a lot of people doing the honk the horn thing to me with the Uga horn and the bulb horn. Mm-hmm. One of the guys that works in the village is a master flute maker. He makes these beautiful wooden flutes, and he came up and he was really in love with the sound of that brass bulb horn. He's like, "Man, this is a fantastic horn, so it's kind of cool to connect on that. But I love that, like, a lot of people want to take pictures or are just really happy to see it. And I think it, that's the most fun thing. Or when kids are like really excited, even dogs really like it.
Yeah.
So
Now, do you tour in the rain too? Like,
no, I
I've
typically
driven mine in the rain, and I've got an open car too, and they're not great in the rain.
no, I have been caught in the rain a couple times, like with a light rain shower, and people just laugh because I do have the accessory windshield wiper, so I'm like,
Yeah.
doing it by hand.
Yeah.
And but the funny
That's
thing is you dry out pretty quickly
Yeah.
when it gets going. But no, if it's really raining, we don't do the tour, so it's really a fair weather cruiser, and it wouldn't be, even if you had the top out, it really wouldn't be that much fun in a downpour or something. So
Yeah.
So what about the car on the backside here? What are we looking at here?
So
That's
behind it
big.
is my 1931 Ford Model A sedan, and it is totally stock setup, and it's one that I bought from a friend of mine here in Asheville, and it was restored, I think, in the late 70s, and it was at one point he told me it was a fine point show car, and it's got a beautiful lacquer paint job and pinstriping LeBaron Bonney interior. And I bought it from him. I thought I was gonna try to hire another driver and maybe do two cars, but it's kind of difficult to with scheduling and all that to find somebody. And I used to work in doing HR and stuff, and when you have to schedule people and deal with all that, it's kind of nice to just be a one man show. So haven't decided if I was gonna I haven't decided if I was gonna use it for tours or what. So it's kind of, it may be for some YouTube content or advertising or promotion of Mountaineer Motor Tours, or even, I've thought about some stuff in the winter. So I kind of haven't quite figured out how it fits into the mix yet, but it's a really
beautiful
fun car.
and the four-door sedans like that are pretty rare. That's a
Right.
piece.
Yeah, it's a pretty car for sure. And it is 12 volt, right? The T is 12 volt, right, Robert?
The T is 12 volt. Yep.
Yeah, for that motor, it almost have to be.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it has an entirely new wiring harness. So Steve put in a painless wiring harness, and everything's 12 volt. It has a little racing alternator, and standard Ford ignition setup.
Robert's asking if that's how you keep people warm.
No, I am doing some service work right now. So I was kind of cleaning up. I wasn't ever totally happy with how some of the routing was for the battery cables. So I've been kind of cleaning up some of the wiring back there and have the floorboard out. The guests, this is actually super cool. So the way I keep my guests warm is I bring a lap blanket along when we do tours in the cooler weather. So late October, November. And I had a friend of mine who is a weaver here. Her name is Deanna Lynch, and she has recreated some of this fabric that was woven in the facility that the car museum is in today, Biltmore Industries fabric. And they were actually making lap blankets for open touring cars in the 20s.
Yeah,
so she is
and everything. Yeah, some of them had
same setup. So she recreated the blanket and even made a new Biltmore Industries tag. So I have a little piece of history I can connect with the blanket
Is
as well.
Is there one that's in that T on the right when you walk in the museum?
No, that is an old horsehide blanket that a person donated to the museum. Mine is like a heavy wool blanket, and it's kind of a herringbone tweed pattern.
Yeah, I couldn't remember for sure.
I gotta get one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially where you are, Steve. You might want to go ahead and pull your floorboards out too.
Yeah,
That's right. Let a little muffler heat up.
Yeah. That's what I did when we went across country. I took the tow board out.
Yep.
So, Heath, I understand you're doing some teaching as well.
Yeah, I just finished. Today actually was my last class of the term. I have been teaching a class for UNC Asheville's College for Seniors program. It's called the OLLI program, and it is a course called The Evolution of Asheville's Built Environment. And all about architecture, natural landscape, cultural changes here. And I went from 1886 to 2025, kind of, talking about the history of Biltmore Estate. I mean, all these things that have been like major driving factors in evolving Asheville. So it was really fun.
So you said Biltmore, you've brought that up a few times. Touch on Biltmore, and I know you've done some tours through there. I know you're not allowed to stop and take pictures with the car in front and everything, but tell people what Biltmore is real quick. That's not Biltmore there, but we'll get back to that.
Right. So in Asheville is an incredible mansion that is on a beautiful landscaped manor ground, and it is called the Biltmore Estate and was built in 1895 by George Vanderbilt. And he is a descendant of Cornelius Vanderbilt. He is his grandson. And some people may be familiar with Cornelius Vanderbilt, pioneered the Pennsylvania Railway. And the show The Gilded Age is loosely based on the Vanderbilt rise to prominence and affluence. And he built a 150,000 square foot house here in Asheville that originally was sited on 150,000 acres, excuse me, 125,000 acres, and that's been whittled down over time. Some of the land was sold to become Pisgah National Forest in the about 1916. And it is an incredible tourist attraction today. So it's been in numerous movies. It's a beautiful French chateau home designed by Richard Morris Hunt, and is on beautiful. So they have gardens. There's a winery there. There's several beautiful hotels, one 5-star resort, restaurants down in the property, and it's this incredible historical attraction that really, when George Vanderbilt built it, changed the trajectory of Asheville. I mean, it's a very high tech home for 1895. Had its own water source. They had their own electrical generators there that was making enough electricity they could sell it back to the city of Asheville. It's an incredible place to see. Now, I haven't done any Model T tours there. That would be something that I could not do. I have driven the Model T on the estate grounds. I did bring it out there for a photo shoot event one time. But typically, if I'm at Biltmore doing any tours, it's on like a charter bus.
All right. Which house are we looking at here, or the motel?
So this is a drawing of the original Battery Park Hotel in downtown Asheville that was built in 1886 and was constructed by a developer named Frank Cox. And it was on top of a big hill that overlooked downtown Asheville. And later, E.W. Grove demolished the hill and the hotel to build our first indoor shopping mall that was called the Grove Arcade in the late 1920s. And it's a crazy story. Like, he literally moved, I don't know how many cubic tons of dirt, and then took all the dirt and filled in a ravine south of town, rural area with all this fill dirt, which became our first motor mile in Asheville in 1924.
So I think this video here has got the Sawyer building in it. Is that
Yes,
right?
sir.
So,
Yeah, so this is one of the highlight buildings of the Asheville Motor Mile. So this is we'll get there. This is a little drone footage from my friend Tim Birchfield at Line of Sight Technology. This is the Sawyer Motor Building. This was, we believe, the second automobile dealer built on Cox Avenue, which is named in honor of Frank Cox. And this was finished in 1925. It's a 4-story building. And because Asheville does not have a lot of large level ground, all these car dealers were built as high rises. So they would have concrete ramps that would connect like a parking garage. And so the first floor in the Sawyer building would have been the showroom, and you would drive up to the second floor where the service department was. Third floor would be the body shop, fourth floor inventory, and even all the way up to the roof. This building is built like a fortress, and it is named for Eugene Sawyer, who brought the first automobile to Asheville in 1901, which was a Locomobile steam car, and he brought it to Asheville to promote Colgate Palmolive Octagon soap at his brother Clarence's grocery store on Pack Square, which is the central square of downtown Asheville. So this was kind of his really last big dealer building that he built. He started selling cars in 1901 and was the only automobile dealer for 5 years in the city, and sold a number of vehicles to George Vanderbilt that were used on the Biltmore Estate property. So really pioneer in Asheville history. But this I think of as really one of the crown jewels of Cox Avenue. That was the original. This was designated as a zoned motor mile for the city of Asheville in the 1920s. So this is where all the machine shops, car dealers, repair places were, probably until about the late 70s, early 60s, late 70s, when a lot of stuff started moving out of town, including big retail stores in downtown Asheville. So today it is home to the craft brewery district that is called the South Slope neighborhood, which was a kind of a marketing name, came up sometime around 2013. And there are about 8 or 9 craft breweries down there, as well as a gin distillery, cidery, some restaurants. And a lot of the old automobile dealers have been turned into mixed commercial and residential. So they're like the Sawyer building has 25 condos, and then office space on the first floor. And that's
So-
actually where I used to work in accounting. So
So these views right here are why me and Jennifer go up there so much, just because it's so beautiful.
it's gorgeous. Yeah, this is looking out really towards Pisgah, right at kind of a little bit past Golden Hour. So this is from Cox Avenue, and Tim is just doing kind of a panorama all the way around the city. So you're kind of surrounded by beautiful mountainscape and incredible views even in downtown Asheville.
Steve?
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I really find it. I find the 20s and 30s, the architecture, the cars, the fashion, everything just so fascinating. So I can see why you've zeroed in on that for your tours.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like that was that's really our most kind of explosive decade as far as development and architecture. And so I'm like, when you think about time traveling, like what better way to do it than in a Model T?
Yeah, your guests must really get a thrill riding
It's
your car.
and what's even more fun is that when people dress up, like we'll have, like I always wear period clothing, so I have usually a Panama hat or newsboy cap, and then I wear a 3-piece suit. In the summer, I don't wear a jacket because it's a little bit too warm, so I wear a waistcoat, shirt and tie, and that keeps me protected from the sun too. And I work with a tailor at a company called Tom James. So I usually have my suits custom made because I'm kind of an odd build, but also in fabric that will keep me cooler.
So Vince has a question here. Can you see that?
So yeah, let's see. So he says, your profession seemed to have evolved from percussion to history. Was this always an interest of yours, and will you end up back in your first interest at some point? Well, I still play percussion, so I still am a drummer, always will be. And I have always loved history ever since I was a little kid. I grew up in a household where both of my parents loved architecture, music, pop culture, and my grandfather was a hot rodder. So he grew up drag racing down in Florida and modifying cars. And I grew up hanging out in his workshop as a little kid, and he had a big pegboard where he collected antique tools, which I was fascinated, old planers and drills and small hand tools. And his stories of like drag racing his 55 Chevy and racing to Daytona with his buddies or going to Sebring to see the races down there. And he was a civil engineer for the state of Florida and was one of the engineers on the original Sunshine Skyway Bridge that unfortunately was hit by a large boat in the 70s and caused a pretty terrible accident. And then since then built a new Sunshine Skyway connecting Tampa over Tampa Bay. But he was a young man on that project. Started when he was 23 years old, and it was finished when he was 30. So it's kind of just being around my family and growing up in Asheville, you're kind of surrounded by history and culture. I mean, it was a big part of our schooling too when I was in elementary through high school.
All right. We'll get to the museum now, if that's all right with y'all.
Sure.
So, and I'll pause it as I need to here, and you can see some of the other buildings that you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And
so this is Grovewood Village, and this is some footage that my friend Tim took. We had a little like car meetup back in November, actually late November, early December of 2024. So these are some classic cars coming to the museum. So these are all these old cottage style buildings that were built from 1917 to 1923 was the last year of them. So it took about 6 years.
So
and
the motel, the Grove Park has been there how long? And there's been some famous people, automotive people that stayed there too.
That's right. So the Grove Park Inn that I talked about, Edwin Grove, so his son-in-law was a guy named Fred Seeley, who also was in the pharmaceutical business, and he's the person that built Grovewood Village. And the Grove Park Inn dates to 1913, so it is now 113 years old. And this was built in 1917. And the Grove Park Inn, so Fred Seeley and Edwin Grove were connected with a lot of political and celebrity figures. And the story is that Fred Seeley was roommates with Henry Ford in Detroit when he was working for the Park Davis Pharmaceutical Company. So on one of the vagabond trips with Henry Ford, Harvey Firestone, Thomas Edison, they came through Asheville and stayed at the Grove Park Inn.
That's
And this
interesting.
led off kind of a lifelong friendship between Fred Seeley and Henry Ford. And I've even found some correspondence between Fred Seeley and Thomas Edison, where Seeley was asking about sonar for submarines just in a casual correspondence with
By the
Thomas
way,
Edison. But a lot of famous F. Scott Fitzgerald was a guest there, caused a lot of trouble and debauchery at the Grove Park Inn in the 1930s. His wife Zelda was interred at a sanitarium here called Highland Hall, and sadly set the building on fire and perished in the fire. So a lot of incredible history. But Grove Park Inn has been home to. If you visit there, there are pictures all over the walls of Harry Houdini and Margaret Mitchell and many famous authors, entertainers, political figures. But yeah, definitely. There's actually a 1913 Model T from the museum, our museum collection, that's on loan in their lobby of the Grove Park Inn.
They use a. I don't want to get too far in the video here. What is the car that was sitting out front? That it was a blue car. It didn't have the original engine in it.
So they have a 1917 Cadillac touring car that they use for photographs and weddings, and it has been resto modded. It has a 3.8 liter V6 out of a Buick that is still carbureted, and then it has I think it's 700 R4 or turbo 350 transmission, but it still has the stock rear axle in it and stock mechanical brakes, lever actuated brakes. So that would be something I would recommend probably upgrading. But it's a beautiful car. They just had it repainted and redid the interior, but it's always usually parked out front.
So how did you touched on this earlier? How did you become a docent at the museum? I'm gonna just let the rest of the video just loop while we're talking.
Sure. So this is some footage of inside the museum. The collection is a collection of 19 cars, and it opened in June of 1966. So this property was bought by a gentleman named Harry Blomberg, who lived around the corner in the Grove Park neighborhood. And he came to the bankruptcy sale when Biltmore Industries, this weaving business, was about to be sold. And he came up intending to buy just some antiques and ended up buying the entire business for $50,000 in 1953 and reviving it. He did get the weaving going, which continued until the mid 1980s. But as an added attraction, he really viewed this as more of a tourist attraction. So he didn't, it was not realistic to try to pursue a full-fledged weaving operation again. In the heyday was making 900 yards of fabric a day, but the demand was not there for this type of fabric in the 50s. So he scaled down that business, which freed up this building of equipment that was the weaving shed, and he decided to put his personal antique car collection on display in 1966. So this entire collection still belongs to the Blomberg family, who owns Harry's on the Hill, Harry's GMC here in Asheville. They still own the entirety of the property and do a wonderful job managing it. So the dealer is on its fourth generation. It's run by Harry's great-granddaughter and her mother. And then this Grovewood Village is run by Harry's daughter, who's in her 80s, Barbara, and the rest of his family, and they're very involved in it. I became a docent. I've been going to the museum since I was a little kid. So my dad used to pick me up and hold me up to look in all the cars, my brother and I. And it's a place that's very special to me, very sentimental because of spending time with my parents there. And it's just like, it has this incredible feeling when you walk through, but also in an era where everything changes so much so quickly. This place really has not changed in 60 years. Like, it's still pretty much the same. The cars don't rotate. There's no offsite storage facility. Occasionally we'll put out some temporary exhibits, but we also have a lot of really cool like photographs of old Asheville things. And so just being infatuated with it since I was a kid, I ended up being connected with the manager, who's my friend Tom Anders, and he hired me as a just to kind of fill in when people were sick. And then I eventually got to a point where I was working there 1 to 2 days a week, which I still do. And the museum is only open seasonally. It just runs from we open April 1st and go to the end of December, so we close for the winter.
Vince asked if you've ever taken any tours through the park.
Oh, through some of the national parks?
Yeah.
That would be a little bit too far of a drive. So I typically stay within about 30 minutes of home. So I have not driven the T or the tour. To do tours on the Blue Ridge Parkway, you actually have to go through a pretty rigorous permitting process and pay for an expensive permit. And the Blue Ridge Parkway gets pretty crowded during the summertime. So that's something I really wanted to focus on. I think of the T more as a different venue for teaching history rather than just a ride. So there's a lot of tours, where people just ride in a novelty vehicle, but I wanted this to be the emphasis really on the information and the T as the vessel for storytelling rather than just kind of a novelty ride. So I don't really do stuff out that it would be a pretty far drive, and I think people will be pretty worn out by the end of it.
What's the most popular question a guest asks, and is it different for their age, whether they're in their teens or if they're 75, 85? Is there different questions that people ask?
Like at the car museum or
at the car museum.
A lot of people are curious about the history of the cars, like where they came from. And the neat thing about this collection of cars is the majority of them are local to Asheville. So a lot of them were sold brand new in the city, and they're connected to people that are significant in Asheville's history. So my favorite car in the museum is the 1927 LaSalle, because this car was sold new here. I also like this 1926 Cadillac touring car a lot.
That was my favorite one.
That is a beautiful car. Yeah. This blue Cadillac, the 57 Eldorado Brougham, was sold by Harry in 1957 to a lady that was 81 years old named Edith Bryant, and she lived in Biltmore Forest, which was the neighborhood that Edith Vanderbilt developed in the 20s. And her husband, Charlie Bryant, was one of the founders of Champion Paper in Canton. And she custom ordered this car and had a chauffeur that drove her around Asheville in it. And this would have been the most expensive car you could buy in 1957 at right around $13,250.
And people need to see the doors there.
They're clamshell doors. So they open, so the rear door opens in reverse, and it has a stainless steel hardtop, which is unique to the Eldorado Brougham. So there were only 400 of those made in 1957. They were all assembled by hand, not on the assembly line. And that car is mostly original. It is the original colors, Lake Placid blue, and it has been repainted one time, but the interior is all original. It only has, I can't remember the mileage precisely, but it's only right around 58,000 miles. So after Mrs. Bryant died in 1972, her daughter traded it in to Harry at the dealer, and he kept it all these years, and it entered the collection sometime in the early 80s. But that's probably the favorite car in the collection. A lot of people want to know how long it is, how much it weighs, how much it's worth, what kind of gas mileage does it get, are some of the kind of common questions.
Now, did you tell me that one had air ride suspension on it originally?
It did, yeah. So that has a factory self-leveling air ride suspension. And that car has been converted to coil springs because the original air ride was fairly problematic on the Bromes, and that was a constant issue that Harry had. He got so fed up, he just said, we'll convert it to coils. But originally, we still have all the air suspension parts for it, but that was done before it entered the collection. So actually, after Mrs. Bryant bought it, it collapsed on the airbags and left her stranded like maybe 1 or 2 days after she bought it.
Now
that leads me to a question. Is there a back garage somewhere that's full of interesting things that the public doesn't get to see that you guys?
Everything that we have out on display is everything that we have. So there's no secret storage or anything like that. So it's not your typical museum where there's a big offsite storage. We don't have a ton of space, but we try to make do with what we have, and the building is so unique. It's really a great display for the cars. They look very at home. It's kind of like has a post and beam ceiling and wood on the top, and just really cool building.
What was that one right behind that Brougham? I think it was it a Franklin, or was that?
So there is right behind the Brougham. It's not a Franklin. It is actually a car that is called a Chandler that was made in Dayton, Ohio. Yeah, so it's got a straight 8, and they were later bought out by Hupmobile. But it does look like a Franklin grill. It's called a Chandler 8.
Yeah.
And what year is the fire truck?
The fire truck is a 1922 American LaFrance. and it is an original Asheville fire truck that was purchased by the city in November of 1922 and shipped down by rail car. And they would send an American La France representative to train the fire department on how to use it. And then it would be taken to the lake where they would test the pump equipment to make sure it all worked. And that was in service until 1965.
Wow.
And that was because the fire department had no money because of all this, our spending in the 20s and having to pay back all this debt. We had no money for new fire equipment. And Harry, so Harry provided a new Pontiac to the fire chief every year in Asheville. And I thought that was, maybe it was some kind of backroom deal, but I actually found the bill of sale when the city traded it into American La France. And then Harry bought it from them. And I think I wrote an article about it on the Grovewood website. I think he paid, I think it was maybe $4,000 or $6,000 he bought it for in 1965. And then his dealer did a full frame off restoration on it in 1979. So
Yeah,
that
I know on the
involved
video that I
repainting
did.
it.
I know in the video I did, we got some good close-ups of the engine and everything,
Yep.
and with the pinstriping and everything. Steve, I know Bruce is still on here. What year is the fire truck that he just picked up?
That's a good question.
Maybe
He's on. He'll let us know shortly, I'm sure.
Yep.
That is a really neat museum. Wow.
It's really cool. And this green, Todd was asking me what car is kind of overlooked when people come through. And I would say this 1928 Pontiac sedan, everybody loves the fire truck and the Brougham, but this is a really cool car because it's got a straight six in it and it's like very torquey. A lot of these cars, so we don't drive the cars because the building is really hard to get them in and out of. So there's an upper level and a lower level, and they're probably like the lower level is maybe 8 or 10 feet below the upper level. And the way they used to take the cars did used to go in and out more, and they would have to bolt a winch to the floor and winch them down these really steep ramps backwards to get them down. And so we do start them a couple times a year. It used to be like every quarter, but we're down to about 2 times a year just due to budget. Since COVID, it's been and the hurricane, it's been a little bit tough recovery road. But all the cars, probably about 50% of them are in running condition now. Last time we did a start on them, and we do work on them in the museum, typically during the off season, and we have a big hose we put on the exhaust pipe and run out the window. And they typically don't run super long. Like we'll try to at least get them up to temperature, go through a heat cycle, but we do not store fuel. They do have oil in them, which has been changed pretty regularly, and coolant, but we don't keep fuel or batteries in them. So we just bring that out. When we start them, we'll just run. We have an electric fuel pump that will just run right into the carburetor and fill enough to fill the float bowls. And run them for a little while that way, and then, but yeah, you're always concerned about fire, so we safety is number one.
There's also the
Now this one, I think you.
This is my favorite, the 1927 LaSalle, and this car has a cool story. So this one belonged to the son of the original LaSalle dealer. So this was down in downtown Asheville. There is a street called Market Street, North Market, that was one of the original car dealer areas in the early 20s. Not as expensive as the Cox Avenue Motor Mile, but this car was special ordered in 1927 by John Lang Jr. in this tritone color. So it's black, kind of a dark maroon, and like an oxblood red. And it has the accessory solid disc wheels that were a $150 add-on. And it's got a beautiful red interior. And this car, during the Depression, was hidden away in their hotel in downtown Asheville that was called the Landgren Hotel, built in 1912. And when it was demolished in 1964 to build the parking garage for, at that time, would have been the BB&T building, which was like a big skyscraper. It's still there today. It's the Hotel Aris now. But Harry heard about this building from a friend of his. It was a guy named Jerry Sternberg, who was a salvage scrap guy here in Asheville. And he said, hey, there's 2 old cars in the basement of this hotel. It turns out they were that 27 LaSalle and the 1928 Chandler. And he pulled them out of the basement. We had the bill of sale from John Lang III. And he cleaned them up. So we believe the paint on the LaSalle is original and the interior was cleaned up. and restored. It just from being this basement, there was like a garage door access off the street, and the cars were supposedly covered in Venetian blinds to protect them. And the son who sold them to Harry didn't actually even know they were down there. And Harry cleaned them up, and he took them on. He was pretty involved in the Antique Automobile Club of America Blue Ridge chapter, and so I have a picture of them in a car show on the Biltmore estate in 1965 that we have out on display for people to look at. That the son of the gentleman who restored the interior gave us a great collection of photographs, and we've displayed some of those since then around the building. And there's a great blog that I put together with our marketing director Ashley on the Grovewood website. And we've also written like a total documentation blog on the history of the fire truck, as well as the Eldorado Brome. So if you go to grovewoodvillage.com and click on their news section, there are several blogs about the history of these old, if you want to take a deeper dive. And then if you come in the museum, we've got QR codes on the plaques that'll take you there and a little bit more information about the cars. But
so Bruce from Klepp's Garage, he picked up on his channel, I think it's tomorrow night or Friday night.
It's tomorrow night. Yeah, tomorrow
night. He picked up La France. I think it was a little bit earlier than this. So if Bruce is still watching, this is exactly what we expect to see at the end of the video tomorrow.
That's right. Well, it's crazy. Asheville bought 6 American La France in the decade of the 20s. And these were, I found in the city council minutes, these were $12,500 for this. This is a pumper truck. It does have a tank on it as well as a chemical tank. But it was $12,500 when a Model T would have been probably $500.
Oh yeah.
So just to kind of extrapolate the difference. So that's a great. I see Bruce's question about the foundation of the building. So this building is very stout. It has big beams underneath the building that were meant to hold the weight of. So this building originally contained 40 fly shuttle looms that weighed probably about 2,500 pounds a piece. So, a lot of the loom equipment would have weighed as much or more than these vehicles. So there are some massive wooden beams and a stone foundation underneath the building. The building is made out of ceramic block covered in stucco. And then it has a wood roof with asphalt shingles, which is how it was originally constructed in 1970. They did have asphalt shingles. I found a bill from 1917 for red asbestos shingles at that time. So
I know the coffee pot next door. Jen and I got to go next door one time a couple years back. It was still closed off. The coffee pot next door, it's about 4 foot tall. So I mean, that was probably like 500 pounds worth of coffee just doing.
Yes.
Talking about the way they were built. I mean, that thing it's probably chest high. It's massive.
At their peak, they employed about 100 people there. So it was a really, really busy place, and they were working 6 days a week. They did, regular 8:30 to 5 shift Monday through Friday and a half day, 9 to 1 on Saturday. So they were really cooking.
Yeah, that's a beautiful fire truck for sure.
It's a great truck, and it's a good runner too. So it's got a T-head inline 6-cylinder. So Asheville really sprang for the best trucks they could buy at that time. They were looking at some Mack trucks, but ultimately went with the La France just based on the reputation. And we had a fire chief was a guy named Alonzo Duckett that was really into investing into really much more modern firefighting equipment at that time. So that's when we saw like a much better system of fire hydrants and fire engines. And we had a couple tiller trucks, American La France tiller trucks as well. So, it was a really, really cool decade. We were really thinking ahead. I mean, we bought the best equipment money could buy.
Steve, anything you want to add to it?
Oh no, it's really interesting. I got to get down there and.
You got to get down here, Steve.
That's what I got to do. Yeah.
We'll give you the tour.
Yeah. All right. I understand you have some events coming up.
Yeah. So in addition to the Model Ts, I love kind of everything. I'm into all kinds of cars. I also have a 1956 Chrysler 300B, and it was a car I stumbled upon accidentally in one of the old buildings on Cox Avenue. So when I worked down there, one of my clients that I did tax work for had a collection of old cars in their building, and I heard about it from my manager at the time, and he said he knew I was really into cars, And of course, as a car person, you should always tell people you're into old cars, so they'll give you leads. And he invited me up, and this building, it's the Motor Parts building down on Cox Avenue, had about 8 or 9 classic cars in it. And I went up there, and it was really cool stuff, like a 1940 Plymouth Road King coupe and a 70 Plymouth Sport Fury, a couple old Fox body Mustangs from the 80s, and tucked in the very back corner, 1956 Chrysler 300B, one of 1,100 made. It is in Raven Black, and it took me 6 years of bugging them to finally get them to sell it to me. And we got it back on the road. A couple friends and I fixed it up together in 2023 and got it roadworthy again. And I've since been steadily improving it, really just cleaning up wiring and plumbing and rebuilding stuff and making it better. And I am, in learning more about this car, I joined the Chrysler 300 Club International, which is a club dedicated to the Chrysler letter cars, 300 letter cars from 1955 to 1965, and then the Hearst Chrysler 300 that was made in 1970. So pretty specific niche, but we have about 800 members all over the world. So we've got members not only across the United States, but in Luxembourg, Australia, New Zealand, Finland, Sweden, France. And at our last meet in Buffalo, we actually had Buffalo, New York, we had a couple people from Luxembourg and Australia, which was super cool. And it's just fun being around people that are passionate about these cars. They're very unique. So just as an example, my 56 is one of only 1,100 made in 1956. According to our registry, we think maybe 250, 300Bs survive, and maybe half of those are roadworthy. So you don't see a whole lot of them. And they put out a call. They said, hey, we're looking for somebody to host the spring 2026 meet. And I really wanted to not only share Asheville with these people, because I think we have some incredibly unique automobile history here, but, we still really need people to come to Asheville since the hurricane. It's really devastated the tourism. 2025 was a pretty tough year, trying to bounce back from that in 24. And I just was like, hey, I'd also like to push myself and see if I could pull it off. And so we are hosting the meet here from May 27th through the 31st. So in these meets, we typically will do some kind of sightseeing and educational activities. So we're going to go to the Biltmore Estate, and there is a botanical preserve called the North Carolina Arboretum that we're going to go to. And then on the last day of the meet, we typically host a car show, which could be at a car dealer or a parking lot somewhere. And I said, hey, I really want everybody in the club to get the true flavor of Asheville. And so I thought, well, could we do a car show on Cox Avenue, the original Motor Mile? And the club was like, hey, we're cool with it. So I've been working through the process with the city of, we're going to close down the street from one city block and park the cars on the street, which is a really wide avenue that was meant for all this commercial traffic of the vehicles. And so we're going to host the Motor Mile Car Show on Saturday, May 30th. So we'll have everybody that brings their classic Chrysler to the meet will display them, but we're also inviting the entire community to participate. So we'll have local and regional clubs in Western North Carolina, as well as close by, in South Carolina, inviting people to come up, display their cars. There's no charge to display your car. So, I really want it to be accessible. And then it's open to the public for free. So you don't have to pay for a ticket. You just show up. And we want people to come, there's not a lot of cars. Strangely, there's a lot of people with cool cars in Asheville. There are like no car activities in downtown Asheville or North Asheville. And I've never been able to figure out why. And so I was like, we need to create a venue for that to happen. So that's kind of how it blossomed. But it'll be Saturday, May 30th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we're going to have all the cars parked on the avenue. We probably have room for 100 to 150 cars down there. And it's right in the heart of the brewery district. So a lot of good restaurants, beer brewery places to visit. And then we have the backdrop of all those incredible buildings like the Sawyer Motor Building you guys saw earlier in some of that drone footage. So I'm really excited about it. It's been a dream of mine for a long time to do a car show down there and share this history, because nobody's ever really looked into it before. They're like, oh, it's just old car dealers or whatever. And I'm like, but man, this is just so cool. So that's my next project. So we'll be, that's what we're working on. And it's going to be, we have a really, really great club. Everybody's super nice, wide range of ages and some really neat cars.
Yeah, we're hoping to make it up there for that one.
I hope you'll bring your tea.
Yeah, we're hoping to. That's the plan. That's the plan.
Awesome.
But Heath, I appreciate you joining us tonight.
Yes, sir.
That's great.
And Stephen, I appreciate you helping me out with the streaming part here.
Yeah,
and,
of course, anytime. It was fun.
Yeah, it was definitely fun. So I don't have a cool outro yet, but I do have a new computer screen, so I'm happy about that. So, but just to make sure I'm doing this right again, Steve, I just need to hit end stream.
That's
right?
it.
And that'll take everyone off and leave us three here for a minute, right?
Yeah, I think you have to re-add us after. But
Okay. All right. Well, again, thank y'all for watching, and share this with your friends, and we'll do it again some other
Thanks,
time.
everybody.
See you. Nice to meet you.
Absolutely. Yeah, nice to meet you, Steve.